Hello friends, myself Rasika Pagaria from Arahant College. In last lecture, we were studying about the IMF, right? We studied about some structure of IMF. In that we studied Board of Governor and Ministerial Committee. Then we studied the Executive Board. The IMF, there are 24 member executive board takes care of the daily business of the IMF. Together, these 24 board members represent all 188 countries. Large economies such as the United States and China have their own seat at the table, but most countries are grouped in constituency representing 4 or more countries. The largest constituency include 24 countries. The board discuss everything from the IMF staff's annual health checkup of member countries, economic to economic policy issue relevant to global economics. Then managing director and staff. The managing director, who is chosen by the executive director, is responsible for the conduct of the ordinary business of the fund. He is appointed for 5 years term. Then the function of IMF exchange arrangement. As a result of second amendment in article, each country can appoint for any one of the following in connection with exchange rate. A country can represent the value of its currency in term of any other currency like dollar. The per value of a currency can be represented in SDRs. The exchange rate can be expressed in terms of some currency composite. No country is allowed to represent its currency in terms of gold. The member can make such arrangement where they can show the per value in terms of the currency. Accordingly, in 1935, the arrangement regarding exchange rate determination, the 32 countries had fixed exchange rate in terms of dollar. There are 14 countries whose value is fixed in terms of franc. Then surveillances. It is the responsibility of the fund to see whether the members are serious regarding their function, whether they get guidance from fund regarding exchange rate policy. In respect of conduct of exchange rate policy, fund has approved three principles. A member, in order to get undue benefit, will not prefer any other member. For the sake of abolition of destabilizing force in exchange rate, government should interfere in foreign exchange market. Regarding such intervention, should be kept in view that the interest of the other countries be not affected. Exchange restrictions. In the light of Article 8 of the fund, no country can put any type of restriction on the payment regarding current account. Then consultation and technical assistance. For the sake of effective performance of its function, fund must be having the information regarding the economic policies and economic condition of its member countries. This will be possible if the fund and the members are linked to each other. In 1984, 118 countries completed their talk with fund under Article 4. Then lending for BOP difficulties. Basically, fund is aimed to provide financial assistance to those member countries which suffer from BOP difficulties. But to the poor countries, it also assists in the attainment of growth and elevation of poverty. Helpful for the debtor countries. If any country is facing adverse balance of payment and facing the difficulty to get the currency of creditor country, it can get short-term credit from the fund to clear the debt. Declared of scarce currency. If the demand of any particular country currency increased and if stock with the fund follows below 75% of its quota, the IMF can declare it scarce. Purchasing. IMF purchases the scarce currency by gold. Borrowing. IMF borrow from those country scarce currency that has surplus amount. Then permission. IMF allows the debtor countries to impose restrictions on the imports of creditor countries to promote exchange stability. The main aim of IMF is to promote exchange stability among the member countries. So, it advises the member countries to conduct exchange transaction at agreed rate. Temporary aid for the devalued currency. When the devalued policy is indispensable or any country, then IMF provide loan to correct the balance of payment of that country to avoid exchange depression. IMF is very useful to avoid the competition exchange depression which took place before World War II. Now WTO, World Trade Organization. The WTO, as the cornerstone of the multilateral trading system, seeks to improve and strengthen rules designed to promote the expansion of international trade. See, the WTO as a cornerstone क्या है? ये multilateral trading system है. किसके लिए? To improve and strengthen the rule designed to promote the expansion of the international trade. It is responsible for negotiating and implementing new trade agreement and is in charge of policy member countries adherence to allow the WTO agreement. It is क्या है? Responsible for negotiating and implementing new trade agreement and is in charge of the policy member countries adherence to WTO agreement. Meaning, the World Trade Organization is an organization that intends to supervise and liberalize international trade. See, the World Trade Organization क्या है? ये एक organization है that intend to supervise and liberalize international trade. The organization officially commenced on 1st January 1995 under the Mackage Agreement, replacing the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, which commenced in 1948. See, the originally officially कब start हुआ? When was the WTO formed? It was formed in January 1995 under the मार्केट एग्रीमेंट. कैसे बना ये जो जनरल एग्रीमेंट ऑन ट्रेड एंड टैरिफ था, इसको रिप्लेस करके दे केम अप विद द WTO. GATT, when was GATT formed? GATT was formed in 1948. The organization deals with regulation of trade between participating countries by providing a framework for negotiating and formalizing trade agreement and a dispute resolution process aimed at enforcing participation and adherence to WTO agreement, which are signed by representative of member government and ratified by their parliaments. See, अब क्या बोल रहे हैं यहाँ पे? ये ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्या करता है? द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन डील्स विद द रेगुलेशन ऑफ ट्रेड. ट्रेड के ऊपर सारा डील होता है यहाँ पे. ये ट्रेड कैसे चाहिए, क्या चाहिए, ट्रेड के ऊपर रेगुलेट सारा करता है. किसके बीच में? बिटवीन पार्टिसिपेटिंग कंट्रीज बाय प्रोवाइडिंग अ फ्रेमवर्क फॉर नेगोशिएशन एंड फॉर्मलाइजिंग ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट एंड डिस्प्यूट रिजोल्यूशन प्रोसेस aimed at enforcing participants' adherence to WTO agreement, which are signed by representative of member governments and ratified by their parliament. Most of the issue that the WTO focus on derive from previous trade negotiation, especially from the Ukraine round. See, बहुत से issue क्या करता है? That the WTO focus on derives from previous trade negotiation, especially from the Ukraine ground, that is in 1986-1994. Then we look at the objectives of WTO. The important objectives of WTO are to improve the standard of living of people in the member countries. Right? पहला objective क्या है? Standard of living लोगों का बढ़ाना in the member countries. To ensure full development and broad increase in effective demand. Second point क्या है? To ensure full development, like अच्छे से सब डेवलप हो रहा है कि नहीं वो देखने का, और increase in effective demand. To enlarge production and trade of goods. See, next point क्या है? To enlarge production and trade of goods. To increase the trade of services. Next point, to increase the trade of services. Then the fifth point is to ensure optimum utilization of world resources. See, जो वर्ल्ड में जो भी रिसोर्स है उसका प्रॉपर यूज़ करने का. नेक्स्ट इज टू प्रोटेक्ट द एनवायरनमेंट. अपना एनवायरनमेंट अपने को बचाना है. सी, अपना एनवायरनमेंट बचाना किसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है? एज अ सिटीजन इट्स आवर ओनली अपनी ही रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है एनवायरनमेंट की बचा के रखना. टू एक्सेप्ट द concept of sustainable development. See, ये अपने को डेवलपमेंट कंटिन्यू धीरे धीरे करनी है। ऐसा है क्या, डेवलपमेंट करनी नहीं है किसी भी फील्ड में, वी शुड डेवलप स्लोली स्लोली, राइट। कंटिन्यू डेवलपमेंट होनी ही चाहिए। देन फंक्शन ऑफ WTO, a new world trade body under the fold of GATT was started in January 1995. See, न्यू वर्ल्ड ट्रेड बॉडी। अब गैट कब स्टार्ट हुआ था, न्यू, अभी गैट को रिप्लेस करके क्या हुआ था, यहाँ पे WTO फॉर्म हुआ था, राइट। कब हुआ था, इन 1995। The new Pact of World Trade Organization or WTO was signed by more than 125 member countries. See, the new Pact of World Trade Organization, see, ये न्यू पैक्ट ऑफ वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन और WTO कब साइंड हुआ था, इट वॉज साइंड बाय मोर देन 125 मेंबर कंट्रीज। मेन फंक्शन ऑफ WTO आर एज फॉलो: rationalization of trade tariff in member state. In view of the latest globalization and liberalization trends all over the world, WTO is expected to rationalize trade tariff in different countries. See, in view of a latest globalization, see, जब अपन अभी ग्लोबलाइजेशन लिबरलाइजेशन चल रहा है पूरे वर्ल्ड में, तो WTO को क्या करना है, ट्रेड टैरिफ डिफरेंट कंट्रीज का अच्छे से कंट्रोल करना है, राइट। Now, removal of trade barriers. WTO is supposed to make adequate effort so as to remove trade barriers in different countries which restrict the free flow of goods and services. See, WTO को क्या करना है, WTO is supposed to make adequate efforts to remove the trade barriers in different countries which restricts the free flow of goods and services. Amendment of patent rights. Amendment suggested by WTO to Patent Act in India would enable Government of India to grant patent rights to nationals for 5 years in agriculture, chemical, parasitical, etc. See, amendment suggested, अभी WTO क्या बोलता है, थोड़े से चेंजेस बोलता है into Patent Act in India, जिससे क्या है, it would enable Government of India to grant patent rights to multinational for 5 years in the field of agriculture, chemical, parasitical, etc. Thus, encroachment on intellectual property in different countries will be reduced to the maximum extent. Thus, क्या हो गया, encroachment on intellectual property in different countries, it will be reduced to a maximum extent. Now, WTO Act on Dumping. WTO would ensure that anti-dumping laws are made more precise and specific in member countries so that concerned governments can impose countervailing duties to prevent subsidies export from abroad. See, WTO क्या करता है, WTO would ensure that anti-dumping laws, मतलब जो गलत काम वगैरह कर रहे हैं वो दे आर मेड प्रिसाइज एंड स्पेसिफिक इन मेंबर कंट्रीज। कुछ कंट्रीज़ में प्रिसाइज एंड स्पेसिफिक बनाना ज़रूरी रहता है ताकि गवर्नमेंट अपना अच्छे से काम कर सके और सब्सिडीज़ एक्सपोर्ट फ्रॉम एक्सपोर्ट, फिर जिन चीज़ों पे सब्सिडी मिलना है वो सबको सब्सिडी मिलेगी, जिस पे नहीं मिलना है उस पर किसी को भी नहीं मिलेगी सब्सिडीज़। एफर्ट्स फॉर अमेंडमेंट इन गवर्नमेंट सब्सिडीज़। WTO would endeavor to rationalize export subsidies in different countries so that only a few countries may not benefit from excessive export subsidy. WTO देखता है कि बाबा एक्सपोर्ट सब्सिडी डिफरेंट कंट्रीज़ को अलग अलग सब्सिडी मिलती है, तो ये सब्सिडी क्या है, सब्सिडी का बेनिफिट सबको मिलना चाहिए, जो कंट्री लायबल है सबको उसका फ़ायदा होना चाहिए। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, WTO would try to conceive China to reduce export subsidy so that China may not dump low price good all over the world. See, चाइना क्या करता है, अपन बोलते हैं ना चाइना के प्रोडक्ट एकदम सस्ते हैं, क्यों सब सस्ते हैं, क्योंकि वहाँ पे सब्सिडी वगैरह मिलती है। तो WTO ने क्या किया, चाइना को बोला कि बाबा सस्ते गुड्स ऐसे आपके पास रॉ मटेरियल वगैरह सब इजीली अवेलेबल है, आप टेक्नोलॉजी का यूज़ करके क्या है, सस्ते में सारे गुड्स पूरे वर्ल्ड में डंप मत करो, यू कैन डू दैट। डिप्राइव पॉपुलेशन इन डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज ऑफ देयर लाइवलीहुड। सी चाइना में क्या है, पॉपुलेशन बहुत ज़्यादा है, फर्स्ट पॉइंट। सेकेंड चीज़ क्या है चाइना में, लाइक दे आर हैविंग द लेटेस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी एंड ऑल, तो वो अपने मैन पावर रिसोर्सेज का पूरा यूज़ करके क्या करते हैं, दे आर डंपिंग द लो प्राइस गुड ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड। Protection of intellectual property. WTO would ensure that intellectual property rights in the field of entertainment, literature, IT, software, etc. are protected. WTO क्या करता है, would ensure that intellectual property rights in the field of entertainment, literature, IT, software सब जगह protected हो. At present, many countries lose substantial revenue because of widespread piracy. At present क्या है, बहुत से countries क्या है अपने revenue ऐसे ही lose कर रहे हैं just because of widespread piracy. क्या होता है, अभी IT सॉफ्टवेयर कंपनी क्या करते हैं, हैकिंग वगैरह अपन देखते हैं ना कितना ज़्यादा हो रहा है, बस उसी वजह से लोगों के अकाउंट से पैसे वगैरह जा रहे हैं एंड ऑल, सब इसी वजह से प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है। Elimination of child labor. WTO would ensure that child below 14 are not made to work as farm labor or labor in weaving and textile industry etc. as it is an inhuman practices. See, WTO क्या है, ensures that child below 14 years वो किधर एज ए लेबर ना फार्म में ना किसी टेक्सटाइल में या वीविंग कंपनी में काम करे, इट इज़ अगेंस्ट द ह्यूमन प्रैक्टिसेस। सही है ना, लाइक हर जगह अपन देखते हैं ना चाइल्ड लेबर इज़ प्रोहिबिटेड हियर, नो चाइल्ड लेबर इज़ वर्किंग ओवर हियर, कितने दुकानों में अपन ये स्टिकर्स देखते हैं, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ने अब ये लगाना कंपलसरी किया एंड दे आर सपोज टू डू दैट। Influencing migration policy. WTO would ensure that rich countries like the USA or European countries would exchange their immigration policy so as to allow free flow of labor from one country to another. See, WTO would ensure that rich country like USA or European countries would exchange their immigration, वो अपना immigration policy exchange कर सकते हैं so that labor can move from one country to another easily. Then removal of restrictions on capital flow. WTO would like to ensure that capital and profit repartition among member countries is engaged in member state and as to allow free flow of capital from developed to developing countries and vice versa. See, WTO would like to ensure that कैपिटल एंड प्रॉफिट रिपार्टीशन अमंग मेंबर कंट्रीज, यहाँ पे अच्छे से सब कुछ फ्री फ्लो ऑफ कैपिटल वगैरह चलना चाहिए, किसके बीच में, बिटवीन डेवलप्ड एंड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज एंड वाइस वर्सा। Promotion of international cooperation. WTO would like to see increased industrial, technical and financial cooperation among member states and would therefore encourage free flow of information, technology and scientific know-how among different members. See, WTO क्या करता है, would like to see, अभी WTO को क्या देखना है, इंडस्ट्रीज बढ़ रही है, टेक्निकल फाइनेंशियल कोऑपरेशन अमंग मेंबर स्टेट में सब कुछ अच्छे से बढ़ रहा है, सब कुछ अच्छे से बढ़ेगा तो क्या होगा, इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी नॉलेज भी अच्छे से मेंबर्स के बीच में बढ़ेगा। देन द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज द रीजनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. Over the past decade, regional organizations around the world have been devoting increased attention to the problem of internal displacement. See, क्या है, over the past decade क्या है, regional organization around the world have been devoting attention to the problem of internal displacement. There is good reason for their involvement. उसके इन्वॉल्वमेंट के लिए क्या है, अच्छा खासा रीज़न है. Situation of conflict and displacement rarely remain confined within border. से ये जो situation of conflict and displacement क्या है, rarely remain confined within border. They spill over into neighboring countries and can upset regional stability, thereby often compelling a regional response. See, they spill over into neighboring countries and can upset regional stability, thereby offer compel a regional response. Then European Union EU. The EU traces its origin from the European Coal and Steel Community and the European Economic Community formed by the inter six countries in 1951 and 1958 respectively. See, ये जो EU क्या है, EU कब से, EU का origin कब से है, जब से यूरोपियन कोल एंड स्टील कम्युनिटी फॉर्म हुई है एंड द यूरोपियन इकोनॉमिक कम्युनिटी दैट इज फ्रॉम द inner six countries in 1951 and 1958 respectively. In the intervening years, the community and its successor have grown in size by the accession of new member states and in power by the addition of policy areas to its remit. In the interviewing years क्या है, the committee and its successor अच्छे खासे बड़े हैं by the accession of new members और पावर भी उनकी बड़ी है. द मैसेक्रिस्ट ट्रिटी एस्टैब्लिश्ड इन द यूरोपियन यूनियन अंडर इट्स करंट नेम इन 1993. See, the Maastricht Treaty, which was established in the European Union under the current name is in 1993. The latest amendment to the constitutional base of the EU, the Treaty of Lisbon, came into force in 2009. See, the latest amendment to the constitutional base of the EU, the Treaty of Lisbon, it came into force in 2009. Evolution of European Union. The following point describes the evolution of European Union. Establishment. The European Economic Community had been founded in 1957-58 to oversee the economic integration of the nations of Western Europe. See, the European Economic Committee क्या है? It has been founded in 1957-58 to oversee the economic integration of the nations of Western Europe. In 1967, the EEC joined together with the European Coal and Steel Community and the European Atomic Energy Committee to form the European Community or EC. यहाँ पे क्या हो गया, in 1967 क्या हो गया, the EEC they joined together with the European Coal and Steel Community and European Atomic Energy Community, ये भी साथ में आई and they formed European Community. They formed an European Committee over here. The success of the liberalized trade and internal market policy sponsored by EEC in the 1960s, 70s and 80s made its member more receptive to the greater integration of the EC. See, the success of the excuse me sorry, where we were. सब्सिक्वेंटली अभी एफर्ट्स बढ़ते गए टूवर्ड्स इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल यूनियन की ओर बढ़ते गए, सक्सेस उनके ऑफ ईसी, और क्या हो गया, दे केम अप विद द ट्रिटी ऑन यूरोपियन यूनियन दैट इज़ द मैस्ट्रिक्ट ट्रिटी एंड इट कंक्लूडेड इन December 1991 में ये ट्रिटी कंक्लूड हो गई. द ट्रिटी एनएक्टमेंट November 1, 1993 created the European Union out of the European Community. The treaty enacted November 1, 1993. It created the European Union out of the European Committee. In addition, the European Economic Committee was renamed the European Committee and the EC's Council of Ministers was renamed the Council of Ministers of the European Union. See, the European Economic Committee का अब नया नाम आ गया है, right? It has been renamed as a, ये जो इकोनॉमिक कमेटी थी, द यूरोपियन इकोनॉमिक कमेटी थी, इसका नाम हो चुका है अभी यूरोपियन कमेटी एंड द ईसी काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर. और ये जो इकोनॉमिक कम्युनिटी थी उसके काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स थे, दे आर रीनेम्ड एज द काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स ऑफ द यूरोपियन यूनियन से सारे नाम वगैरह उन्होंने चेंज वगैरह कर दिए. देयर हैज़ बीन सम अमेंडमेंट इन दैट. Goals of European community will start in the next lecture. Meanwhile, you can read the topic well. If you have any doubt, you can mail me on my mail ID. My mail ID is rasika.pagaria@arahamedu.in. Thank you.